Thousands of digital nomads work from Vietnam every year. But is it actually legal? Scroll through travel forums and you'll see people happily working from cafes in Hanoi or beach towns like Da Nang. Yet official rules seem to tell a different story, and that confusion has left many travelers worried about doing something wrong without realizing it. In this video, we'll break down what's truly allowed, what sits in a gray zone, and the smartest way to enjoy Vietnam without risking future travel plans. By the end, you'll know what's safe, what's risky, and how remote workers successfully stay longer without problems. So before you book that flight, let's start with what a tourist visa actually allows in Vietnam today. What a Vietnam tourist visa really allows is, well, pretty straightforward. A Vietnam tourist visa is designed for one simple purpose: travel. It allows visitors to explore the country, enjoy the food, visit friends, experience the culture, and move around Vietnam as a traveler, not as a worker. That part is clear. Where confusion begins is the difference between working in Vietnam and working while in Vietnam. Officially, employment inside the country requires a proper work permit or business sponsorship. That usually applies to people hired by Vietnamese companies or those physically working for local businesses. But, modern travel has changed the situation. Today, many visitors bring their jobs with them. Freelancers, remote employees, online business owners, and digital nomads continue working on laptops while staying abroad. Because they are paid by companies or clients outside Vietnam, many assume this automatically falls outside local employment rules. And this leads to the big question nearly every remote worker asks before coming: if you're working online for a foreign company and not competing in the local job market, does that still count as working in Vietnam? And this is where things get confusing. The legal gray area explained simply comes down to this. Vietnam's labor regulations mainly focus on foreigners working for Vietnamese companies or earning income inside the country. In those cases, a work permit and proper visa are clearly required. That part of the law is straightforward and strictly enforced for companies hiring foreign employees. But remote work creates a gray area. If someone is physically in Vietnam but working online for clients or employers overseas, they are not directly participating in the local job market. Because of this, the situation isn't always clearly addressed in official guidance, leaving many travelers unsure about what's technically allowed. In reality, authorities rarely walk into cafes or co-working spaces checking what people are doing on their laptops. Thousands of travelers quietly work online every day without issues, blending in with students, tourists, and entrepreneurs using the same spaces. However, the key point is that remote work on a tourist visa isn't explicitly approved either. The rules weren't originally written with digital nomads in mind, so enforcement often depends on context, patterns of stay, and immigration decisions rather than daily monitoring. So if many people do it without problems, what's the actual risk? What actually happens in real life is, honestly, pretty interesting. Vietnam has quietly become one of Southeast Asia's favorite remote work hubs. Thousands of digital nomads settle temporarily in cities like Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, and Da Nang, spending months working from apartments, cafes, and co-working spaces without attracting attention. Most simply live like regular travelers who happen to open their laptops for a few hours a day. Immigration officers typically don't check whether someone is answering emails or working online. Entry procedures focus on passports, visas, and travel plans, not what someone does on their computer once inside the country. So day-to-day remote work usually goes unnoticed. The real complications tend to appear later. Travelers who repeatedly extend stays or leave and re-enter Vietnam every few weeks sometimes start getting questions at the border. Reports from online communities suggest immigration officers may ask why someone keeps returning so often or staying for long periods on tourist visas. At that point, officials may suspect the visitor isn't simply sightseeing anymore. And once attention shifts to your travel pattern, entry decisions can become less predictable. And that's where many travelers run into trouble. For years, visa runs were honestly the easy solution for long-stay travelers. People would just leave Vietnam every few weeks, spend a day or two in a neighboring country, and then come back with a new tourist visa. It became kind of a routine strategy for a lot of digital nomads who wanted to stay long-term without switching visa types. But, things have gradually tightened up. Immigration policies are a lot more structured now, and border officers are paying closer attention to travel history. Some travelers report being stopped after several short exits and re-entries. especially when their passports show a pattern of staying almost non-stop in Vietnam. In these situations, officers sometimes ask pretty simple but direct questions like, how long are you staying? What are you doing in Vietnam? Why do you keep returning? While many travelers still pass without much trouble, others have reported getting shortened entry stamps, or in some cases, being denied entry altogether. Modern immigration systems are also just better at spotting patterns, so repeated visa runs are more visible than they used to be, and once you get flagged, future entries can really become uncertain. So what options do long-term remote workers actually have? For remote workers who want to stay in Vietnam longer without constantly worrying about visa limits, there are, thankfully, a few more stable options worth considering. None of these are perfect for everyone, but they do offer safer alternatives to endless tourist visa runs. One common route is getting a business visa through a sponsoring company or agency. Some firms legally support foreigners who collaborate with local businesses, which allows for longer stays under proper documentation. This option takes some paperwork and legitimate sponsorship, but it offers more stability than just bouncing in and out on tourist visas. Another path is for professionals hired by Vietnamese companies. In that case, employers handle work permits and the right visas, making the stay fully compliant. Of course, this mostly suits folks who plan to work locally, rather than purely remote. Some travelers also sign up for language courses or academic programs, letting them stay under student visas for a while. It's not really designed for remote workers, but it can be a temporary solution if you want a longer cultural experience. Others just rotate between nearby countries like Thailand, Malaysia, or Indonesia, avoiding long, continuous stays in any one place. But, a lot of remote workers still ask, what's the realistic risk today? For most travelers, remote work in Vietnam goes pretty smoothly. But honestly, the real risks usually show up when someone pushes tourist visas too far, or just assumes there won't be any consequences. One possible issue is getting denied entry after frequent stays. If immigration officers think someone is basically living in Vietnam on back-to-back tourist visas, they might refuse entry or start questioning your travel intentions a lot more closely. Even when you do get in, some travelers have reported getting much shorter stay approvals than they expected, which can force some sudden changes to your plans. Another risk that often gets overlooked is the lack of legal protection if something goes wrong professionally. Since working remotely on a tourist visa isn't really recognized under local employment laws, any disputes with clients or companies won't be covered by Vietnamese labor regulations. So you're basically on your own if problems come up. Then there's the whole tax angle, which honestly a lot of digital nomads don't think about until it gets complicated. Staying in one country for a long time can bring up questions about tax residency, and every country has its own rules. Ignoring this can lead to some unexpected legal or financial headaches later on. And speaking of taxes, this is something most travelers just ignore. One topic that, honestly, a lot of remote workers overlook is taxes. It's easy to assume that if your income comes from abroad, the local tax rules just don't matter. But, things can get complicated if you spend long periods in a single country. In many places, including Vietnam, staying beyond a certain number of days within a year might raise questions about tax residency. Once someone is considered a tax resident, they could technically become responsible for declaring global income locally. The exact rules, well, they depend on how long you stay, your nationality, and whatever tax agreements exist between countries. Most digital nomads just keep paying taxes in their home country or wherever their business is registered, but honestly, situations can vary a lot. Some travelers accidentally create tax obligations in multiple countries simply because they don't realize how residency rules work. The safest move, really, is to research your personal tax situation before planning long stays abroad. Even just a quick consultation with a tax advisor can prevent some stressful surprises later, especially if you're planning to live overseas for months at a time. Still, Vietnam remains one of the top nomad hubs in Asia. So why do so many remote workers keep choosing it despite these challenges? Despite all the visa questions and, those legal gray areas, Vietnam just keeps pulling in remote workers from all over the world. And honestly, once you get a taste of daily life here, it's really easy to understand why. First off, the cost of living is still one of the biggest perks anywhere in Asia. You get comfortable apartments, amazing street food, transportation, and your everyday expenses for way less than what you'd pay in a lot of Western countries. That means remote workers can keep a high quality of life while spending a lot less. Then there's the café culture. Vietnam's cities are packed with these cozy coffee shops where people hang out for hours, working, meeting friends, or just relaxing. And if you want something a bit more professional, there are plenty of modern co-working spaces in all the major hubs, so staying productive is easy, but you still get that laid-back vibe. Internet speed, by the way, is another nice surprise. In the big cities, you'll find reliable, fast connections, so video calls and online work are smooth for most people. Plus, the nomad communities in places like Da Nang, Ho Chi Minh City, and Hanoi are growing fast, which makes it super easy to meet other travelers and share experiences. And not many countries give you such a cool mix of beach escapes, mountain scenery, and high-energy city life all in one place. But hey, there are rumors that some big changes could be on the horizon. In the last few years, online communities and travel forums have been buzzing with talk that Vietnam might eventually roll out more nomad-friendly visa options. As remote work gets more popular everywhere, a lot of travelers are hoping the country will come up with programs that let digital professionals stay longer and with more flexibility. Part of this chatter comes from what's happening across Southeast Asia. Neighboring countries have already started testing digital nomad or long-term remote work visas to attract skilled travelers who spend their money locally, even while working for companies back home. Seeing that trend, a lot of people think Vietnam could follow suit sometime soon. At the same time, Vietnam's tourism industry has been trying to bring in visitors who stay longer, not just folks on short holidays. Remote workers, retirees, and slow travelers bring steady spending into local economies. So they're a pretty appealing group for future policy changes. Still, it's important to keep hopes and reality separate. Right now, there's been no official announcement about a dedicated digital nomad visa or a permanent remote work solution. Everything's still just speculation and discussion, not law. So what should you actually do right now? If you're thinking about working remotely while visiting Vietnam, honestly, the smartest move is to act like a genuine traveler instead of someone trying to quietly relocate long-term. Immigration decisions usually come down to your travel patterns, so how you enter and move around actually matters more than you might think. First off, don't use tourist visas as a permanent fix. Doing frequent border runs or back-to-back entries can raise red flags, especially if your passport shows you've barely left the country for months at a time. Keeping your stays reasonable and spending some time outside Vietnam between visits helps keep your travel history clean. It's also a good idea to show up with a clear plan, like an onward ticket, a place to stay booked, and some simple sightseeing plans. That way, you look like a visitor, not someone trying to settle down for good. These little details can make getting in way easier. And above all, respect the visa rules. Tourist visas are meant for travel, so keeping your activities low-key and travel-focused lowers your chances of running into trouble. A lot of experienced nomads also rotate between countries in Southeast Asia, enjoying different spots and avoiding long back-to-back stays in just one place. So, what's the final verdict? So, here's the bottom line. Every year, tons of remote workers quietly live and work from Vietnam without any issues, but, the legal situation is still kind of a gray area. The biggest problems usually pop up when travelers try to stick around too long using repeated tourist visas instead of planning their entries a bit smarter. Vietnam is still one of the most exciting and affordable places to live and work remotely, but good planning really does make all the difference. A little preparation now can save you from some major travel headaches down the road. The smartest travelers aren't just chasing cheap living, they're planning for long-term freedom. So before you book that flight, make sure you know the best visa strategy for your trip ahead.